welcome to another episode of The Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ed Greer.
And I'm Ron Swallow. And today we have guests. And boy, am I excited about these guests for a couple of reasons. One, they're very funny, cool people. But two, they do two excellent podcasts. We got Richard Eden and Reid Vanier.
Yeah.
From
Thanks for having us.
Ghostfacers podcast and the Dr. DC podcast.
That's the right way to say those two, too. The Ghostfacers comes first, then Dr.
Yeah, in order of popularity of our shows.
I mean, true.
Today, we are going to be talking about Star Trek and why it's the greatest sci-fi universe. So, guys, you both are comedians, podcasters, and nerds. How did you get into... Not in that order. Probably nerds first. How did you guys end up being like nerdy? Like what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been super nerdy, and I get that straight from the source, straight from my parents, specifically my dad more than anything. But
direct from the tap.
I mean, that's maybe not how I would phrase it, but yeah.
You dripped out nerdy.
Yeah, like we used to watch. Like TNG when I was growing up, like while that was on, like I'm born in 87. So right when the show started, but I was like watching it when I was a kid, and like when I could read, my dad was handing me stuff like Foundation by Isaac Asimov and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So I was reading, and Hitchhiker's Guide and stuff like that. So I was reading, those were the books I was reading. I was watching TNG and when the movies came, Lord of the Rings, and as we've discussed on the show before, I don't know at what point in my development there just became something clicked where it was like, if you like something, you like all of it, and you can't stop consuming it.
It's an insatiable hunger.
You have to have every corner of it in your head. So Star Trek became like that. James Bond became like that for me.
Oh.
My dad had like a small stack of old Silver Age and Bronze Age like DC comics.
Lord of the Rings, like Greek the history.
Truly. The like Legion of Superheroes, stuff like that. And I just got so obsessed with it, and
you can't passively like anything.
I don't passively like anything.
I think a lot of fans are like Galactus, right? You have some herald, be it your dad or it's your friend. Some herald brings you to the planet, and then you decide to eat all of it, and then you decide to go eat all the other planets, and you're just like, yeah, I love this. I love to know about these worlds. I love to consume these worlds, literally, figuratively, all these other ways. So yeah, there's something voracious about fandom. I can dig
that's 100% it. And like the 90s into early 2000s Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm there. Like all sorts of weird like pieces like that. And I drifted away for a bit, partly because like
I got cool
briefly. A very small window of time I got cool.
Started fucking.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to be diplomatic, but yeah, essentially that distracted me.
Working your way through theater backstages.
Yeah, I studied theater and stuff. And then eventually, like when I had disposable income again and I was an adult, I was like, I had that realization where it's like, oh, I can have ice cream for dinner. I was like, oh, I could just buy comics. Like, I don't have to like wait for an occasion or something like that. And so that's when I like really got back in and started collecting. And yeah. And then I think, I mean, you have your own nerd history, but certainly comics. Yeah. That's the osmosis from me, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to give you credit for anything, mostly because your head can't take it. But yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it is, like as a kid, I'm one of 4 boys, and my older brothers especially were like huge influences. That's actually where Trek comes from, honestly, is from my older brothers, and it's just sort of being on in the background and like watching them watch like Thunderhawks and stuff. But I think that for me, it was sort of like a bit of osmosis from my older brothers. And then like it was that whole thing where I like knew I was unpopular, but didn't realize it was because I was nerdy. And it was an unfortunate fact because it made me like not find a community for years. Right. There's like 2 clear photos that I look back of in my family collection that always goes like, God, I wish somebody would have told me, because there's like one where I'm literally at a science fair and everybody else around me is like fucking like potato batteries and volcanoes. And I've got like the history of the atom behind me as my like science fair display. I'm holding a PC Gamer magazine, and I like,
God, you're cool.
Yeah, and I'm just like, God, this poor fucking dork. Like, wouldn't somebody tell him?
Yeah.
Help this kid. And then there's another photo of me where I'm reading a Star Trek novel at camp, and everybody else is playing behind me, and you can see me just like sitting alone reading a Star Trek book.
I mean, what possible experience could they be having that's better than you alone with a book?
Oh yeah. This was a Q and law. I mean, this is the best. But yeah, I think that like for me, it was like a really long sort of haul to like even find that I had a community or anything, because I was just like, oh yeah, well, I mean, everybody reads Star Trek novels and plays like video games nonstop and doesn't have any friends. And
it's funny to realize that the things you think are normal are not in fact normal. I mean, you've been there for so many where I'm like, people don't do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, geez.
Well, do you guys, I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before, but let me tell you how I met my best friend. I was throwing a football to myself because there was nobody to hang out with me. Literally, I was throwing it in the air, running, and then catching it. And Lance Smith shows up, and he's like, hey, you want to do that with somebody? And I was like, oh,
I mean,
okay.
I like that story. But I also think that Lance Smith is a very fake sounding name.
I know. If it helps you, his name is Lance Arthur Smith. And we called him Lance Ace Smith because we're fucking super nerdy. And he's the one who got me into comic books. My dad also was giving me super inappropriate books. I read Friday. The
like
Robert Heinlein one, where
the novelization of the Ice Cube movie.
yes. No,
hell yeah.
The sci-fi novel by Heinlein where he's like, there's like robot fucking.
Oh yeah.
It's like right away, Clan of the Cave Bear, like a bunch of.
Oh my god, my
ass...
mom was reading that when I was a kid, and I wasn't. Yeah. Isn't that a bit smutty or no?
Yeah, there's a lot of fucking.
You guys have already told us basically how you came to Star Trek. That's one of the first questions I was going to ask. So basically, let's go to the second one. What, out of all this nerdy stuff that you guys have consumed, Galactus style, across the multiverses, why is Star Trek different from all these other sci-fi universes? What about Star Trek is absolutely unique? Because I think that's an interesting question, because it has a lot of the trappings of almost everything from Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, Captain Proton. It has all the trappings of almost everything we've ever seen before, but it's heightened to this level. So just from you guys' mouths to God's ears.
I mean, this is a conversation that we have a lot of the time, honestly, about like what makes like Star Trek good and just in case you were thinking we only put this on when the mics are recording. We also talk about this off air. Yeah, it comes up a lot, and it's especially when there's things that do a similar thing. It definitely comes into a conversation and draws comparison, because like I saw Star Wars when I was like, I want to say 8 at like a summer camp thing, and it blew my mind, and I was like, okay, I like sci-fi. Sci-fi is like my thing. It's probably like, of all of the different sort of like nerdy genres, I think sci-fi is probably my number one. But it was interesting because Star Trek, like my brothers watched it and it was always on when I was a kid, but I didn't really like connect with it until I was a bit older. And I think the thing that I always tie into why Star Trek works so well for me is because, it's like, look, the backdrop is sci-fi. No matter what, that's going to be interesting. Like, as long as you can show it in a science fiction-y way, it's always going to be fucking rad. So it's like, well, let that be the foundation here, which is like sci-fi. It's cool. But then I think the thing that we always talk about is like, I kind of like the like nitty gritty bureaucracy on how like really complicated like things work. It's like it's the reason kind of why I love Loki too, which is just like, okay, crazy stuff, but why? And like how? Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I always get into, is that like they're willing to like dissect like sci-fi concepts in a way that like is like doesn't talk down to you and is like, hey, like we're going to like explain to you why this thing is interesting and why it works the way it does. And I think that's the thing that always like connects to me. It's not being like when I read comic books, I rarely go for like the big action stuff. Like I often go for the like esoteric, like thinky stuff. And I think like all Trek is, until, I mean, recently with Discovery and stuff. But
I feel like I mean, it's hard to talk about Star Trek without talking about the obvious point of the sort of like the optimistic vision of the future, which
Roddenberry's like,
which is obviously like a departure from a lot of other sci-fi, which is like, oh shit, we fucked up.
It's post-apocalyptic.
That's a huge part of it. But I think even beyond that, there's a thing that in Star Trek that when it's done well makes me think of like when a Superman story is done well, which is that the science, the tech, like those things are fascinating and incredible, and they help build the world and they help hook you in. But often the thing that saves the day is
the mind,
the heart of humanity, right? Like, you know, what's the thing that happens? I mean, this isn't, you know, someone's going to come up with an example that proves me wrong or whatever, but like the thing on Star Trek is the shields always go down. They always lose weapons. The deflector array is messed up. We can't invert the tachyon beam. The tech inevitably fails them. It's either their ingenuity or their diplomacy or their heart or something else is always the thing that saves them. That's the thing that like lifts them above, right? And I it's funny that you said you watched Star Wars and you went, I like science fiction, because if I'm being honest, I don't see Star Wars as science fiction. It's fully fantasy to me. Like the science of the science fiction in Star Trek is very palpable. And if you want, you can open up a technical manual. You can find out how the EPS conduits work. You can do that kind of stuff. But I think the thing that makes Trek so unique from so many other things is that that's all set dressing. Like when you remove that, you still get an episode of Star Trek, which is why holodeck episodes work, which is why it works when they're stuck in a cave on a planet, which is why like every time they do one of those types of episodes that puts them somewhere else, they travel back in time, you know, you have the DS9 episode, where the prophets give him the vision where Sisko is the writer and he's writing DS9. Like those episodes work because the central conflict is still about people and integrity and loyalty and ethics and values and things like that. So even when you fully strip all that away and you go like, oh, it's 1950, we're wearing normal jackets, it's still an episode of Star Trek. And that's the thing that I think is like, that's pretty unique. If you strip the tech away from Blade Runner, there's not a lot left.
Sure. Well, and the best kind of sci-fi does that. And especially because sci-fi kind of started so that people could make metaphors about problems that no one wanted to talk about in a science fiction-y way. So you're like, oh no, it's fiction. I just happen to also be mentioning that we should, I don't know, not be greedy pieces of shit who ruin each other's lives. How about that? You know, like that's one of the best things about Star Trek to me as well is it's this very optimistic type of thing, a utopia idea, but still has drama.
Here's the thing, though, too. It's not. I would even. I know we use the words interchangeably. It's fine to call Star Trek a utopian future, but like when you look at it, a lot of the bad guys in Star Trek end up being like admirals, rogue sections of Starfleet, other captains who don't share Picard's values. I'm thinking of the one that like goes after the Cardassians, right? Sure, it's interesting that the optimism of Roddenberry's future doesn't preclude the idea that not everyone's going to be on board. And like, he acknowledges that like, you can't weed out the darkness in the human heart, but you can trust that as you remove obstacles from people's lives, they get rid of, until we get into Latinum and stuff, they get rid of money, they eliminate hunger, everyone gets an education, like, as you remove those obstacles and you approach equity, then some of those things you can put more trust in the goodness of someone's heart because they're up against fewer of these things that are going to force them or make them feel like they're forced or whatever into like the darker parts of the human condition.
it's kind of funny because like the way that they like the Federation is actually set up is probably the one thing that like is promoting some of these like bad instincts, which is like you have like a hierarchy and you have to like work up within that, because like otherwise like what are people trying to like be bad or whatever for is like to like go up, make more money, things like that. But if you can't make more money, it's like the only thing that's left is power, right? Which is like the Federation itself like has a system in which you can gain power by like rising in ranks. But
I guess a bit in Starfleet, but the Federation's like the EU, right? Like it's like a loose like each planet has their own government, you know. Like
arguably, it might be more about like, are you a good leader? Like you know, if you're great at leading, then then you move up into that position. But if you're real good at, I don't know, fixing warp engines that are damaged and it's going to take a miracle, well, then that's what you do.
Well, that's the thing that I really
see what I'm saying?
Even about like Lower Decks. Lower Decks actually does a really good job of explaining this, where it's like someone's just kind of like jumping around from department to department. Like they're going like, oh, maybe it's science that I belong in. It's like, no, maybe it's security. Like I like that they're like, well, look, like be the best at the thing. Like, you went through like training, but now like, where do you want to specialize?
Well, and the joke of that episode is he's always nervous to request a transfer to another division, and they're always happy for him. Then it's like, no, you're following your passion. You're great. Like, and that's like the nugget of the Roddenberry in there, right? Like, I love that.
Well, yeah, I just saw that episode, so I know exactly what you're talking about. My girl was watching it the other day of Lower Decks, where the guy's transferring and he's having all this anxiety about all the departments, but they're all like, yeah, buddy, it's great. Go love yourself. Go get your groove back, baby. Go into the Tuscan sun of the other department. But so I definitely get all that. But like, I think that highlights what is to me the most interesting thing about Star Trek is once you take all the economic jazz away, it is about leadership, which is why the captains are the biggest focal points of this entire universe. It's kind of cementing that idea, these captains being that important, and delegating to specialists is the way you save the day. Like organizing specialists, delegating authority is how you save the day and how you show yourself to be valuable in this new society. And last things last, this thing about running into cultures who are still on the money system. I think that was an interesting part of the Next Generation aspect of it, because in the beginning it was quite a bit more optimistic, and you did run into sort of evil people, but they wanted like military victories against you. They didn't want to steal your money necessarily unless they were Orions or something. But once we get to the Next Generation era, that's when it's like, I think that starts the introduction of evil admirals, if I'm not mistaken. Are there a few evil admirals in the very first Star Trek?
Classic Star Trek?
We might be crossing, like TNG may have already started, but in first season of TNG, there's that like conspiracy with the aliens that have taken over like Starfleet Command. Mm-hmm. But then also in Star Trek 6, there's a conspiracy between Admiral Cartwright of the Federation and a Romulan and a Klingon to destabilize the Klingon peace accords, what becomes the Khitomer Accords.
Right. So I'm just thinking like in the first iteration of the show, it just seemed like I'll tell you what kind of turned me off when I started as a Next Generation kid, and I went back and tried to, and I don't want to say tried to watch them. I watched them and I enjoyed a lot of them, the original series. But the thing that I was missing was a little bit of the bureaucracy. I was missing a little bit of it. And I didn't like, and it's funny to say this given the fact that Next Generation starts with a Q episode basically, but the first iteration of the show, it seemed like every other week they ran into somebody with godlike powers. They were just like, I am powerless against you, future Romans. I am powerless against you, Parallax at the beginning of time, or whatever, the Guardian of Time. I'm at your mercy, super god of the universe. Even though I have all this technology, I'm at the mercy of some space god. Every other freaking episode, it seemed like, especially in the first season. And I was just like, this sucks, man. I want to see some Ferengis come out and with a new value system challenge these guys. I don't want to see any more space god crap. I don't want them to feel useless against space god. The whole fucking point of science fucking fiction is that other people are the obstacle. Bureaucracy is the obstacle. Our adaptation to our intelligence is the obstacle.
There's something so interesting in what you just brought up, because when as you start introducing these other value systems, like the Ferengi, or, you know, even a better exploration of the Klingons that we get through TNG and DS9 and stuff like that. The thing that makes it so fascinating is that Starfleet, even their, like, the command structure, are all made up of scientists, and they make sure you know it. Chakotay is like an anthropologist.
Yeah.
Picard is into Chakotay is a paleontologist. Picard is like an archaeologist. You know, Janeway's a scientist. They're all scientists. But who are the characters that you basically never learn or hear about their scientific exploits? The admirals. Starfleet Command is only ever presented as being like military structure.
Yeah.
We can assume, to have risen to those ranks, they must be like the rest of Starfleet, but I think there's something interesting that we never learn that about them.
Yeah, they always seem like they're security officers who went up.
There's always a tension, right? You know, and it's a real tension because they have to look out for the security of the Federation. They have a slightly different priority than go explore.
Yeah.
Real quickly, not to cut you off, but on that particular point, it is very much like they found this thing in the corporate structure of real life, that the people who tend to go up and up and up the ranks are the ones that don't have any specific skill that's so dope, but they have this ability to stay in the room, be around, be a cog in the machine. So they end up being the leaders because Jordan LaForge with his own ship is a waste of the best engineer in Starfleet.
Sure.
You know,
and also, you know, like Kirk becomes an admiral. The whole subplot of The Wrath of Khan is that he's miserable.
Yeah.
He hates it. Like he basically is like waiting to die. So the people that are out there exploring and engaging in science wouldn't be, unless they were like, they're too old, you know, like Admiral McCoy, he's like 120 in the first episode of TNG.
I mean, to be fair, like, you know, he's really old.
60, he's earned it. But you know what I mean? Like, if you're 60 or like 50 and you're an admiral, like, I don't even know what you were doing in Starfleet.
Yeah. Well, and I love the science part of Star Trek and their sci-fi too, because they really want, like, you're not going to interfere with the culture. You have to let that culture be a culture on its own. And you have to learn about the culture because you might learn something about yourself by learning about that culture. And you might improve an already pretty great society by learning more about these different cultures. And I love that concept. And I know doesn't sound sciencey, but it absolutely is science-based.
And that's what made the Borg such great villains, right? They're the opposite. Yep. They're like, we'll take the things of yours we can categorize and quantify, but they're missing that, like, they're not learning anything about themselves. They're just like, and we'll add this and we'll add that. And Starfleet is the opposite. They're not even taking tech. We'll voluntarily not use cloak technology. They're learning, you know, like.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, like, what makes a really interesting, like culture, society in a Star Trek episode or like a planet or something is often, it's like what makes good, like, Batman villains, where it's like you take a element of our own society and then, like, magnify it in some way. And that's,
hold the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what ends up making a really interesting, like, episode, because it's like, okay, well, what if this part of our society became the big thing? Like, what if it was like, there was a female-led, only female society. Like, what does that mean, right? Yeah. Like I think, or even taking, like, good concepts and going, what's the extreme version of that? Or like a bad concept. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think always, those are my favorite episodes. And I love what Discovery is doing, and it's kind of doing a completely different thing, but I'm really excited for the Brave New Worlds, because I think, like, I do love the episodes where it's just like, hey, like, every episode we're going to go check out a new different, like, culture, a new way of living.
You're right about the Batman villains. Yeah. I was listening to the Batman villains episode recently too, so that's also kind of in there. But
God.
But like, reflecting something back, right? Like, the Ferengis reflect back our greed and our ambition and stuff. If you watch, like, DS9, this is the most Star Trek thing in the world. There are episodes where the day is saved by, again, not tech or things like that, but by ingenuity and the heart of a person. But that person happens to be a Ferengi. It's Quark. Mm-hmm. There's an episode where he convinces a Vulcan to do the right thing diplomatically because he's, like, quoting rules of acquisition. And he goes, right now, peace is at an all-time low cost. You're willing to spend this on peace.
Yeah.
And it's not money. He's talking about like metaphorically, but he's like, we know our way out of this too. We're not primitive. It's a mindset thing.
That's why I love
instead of literally talking about money, he says, you want peace.
Yeah.
For that peace, you want to give up this. You want to acquire that.
Yeah.
The rules of acquisition state. And he talks a Vulcan into doing the right move diplomatically.
Yeah.
That's such a Star Trek solution. It's perfect.
I also love the way that they flip it again within lower decks, and they have like the they go to like get a Ferengi to pretend to like act like the Ferengi that we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
And he's just like human, and he's like wringing his hands, and then they like go away, and he's just like, all right, yeah, thanks.
Well, no, I think that speaks. I think the newer treks are speaking to this whole no race is all of one thing. Even when there's a culture like America's supposed to be this culture of rebels, when most of us sit on our couch drinking Mountain Dew and eating Doritos. But you know what I'm saying? I just feel like overall there's supposed to be this cultural signifier. But realistically, it can't be everybody. Everybody can't be a swordsman. Everybody can't be a blacksmith. Whatever these old, it's almost like they used to do them as fantasy races. And I think the more we go towards in the future of Trek, it gets to be more nuanced.
A couple of offhand reference. It might even be an Enterprise. I'm going to pull Enterprise into this.
Oh my God.
There's a reference from a Klingon on Enterprise where he says, like, I used to be a sculptor. We had artists, we had musicians and things like that. But there's like a sort of internal coup of the warrior class taking, like, even if you take that Klingons believe in Kalas and, eating the heart of the enemies and stuff like that. Like, if you make that they're always warrior leaning.
Yeah.
There are these hints that in the recent history of Star Trek, that warrior leaning has like over dominated. Because the question my dad always asked was like, if you get killed for making a mistake, how did they invent warp drive? He's like, how did they evolve as a society? And the answer is because there are other people. We're not seeing them. We always get to see their warriors. They're out in the front, but like there are Klingon scientists. There are Klingon artists. There are Klingon chefs. There are all of those things exist, right?
Worf is not just a warrior. He's a smart guy, a strategist. He can be diplomatic. He has all of that in him, and it's coming out because of the situation.
Don't forget, he is a loyal security officer while being a deadbeat dad. So it's like, you see these.
You're right. You're right.
This duality of man or a Klingon in this respect, in regards to every Kardashian even isn't bad. Every Ferengi isn't obsessed with money. There are some who just want to go with the flow. Nog realizing that, not Nog, his dad.
Rom.
Freak, I'm blanking right now. Rom realizing that he doesn't actually have the lobes for business and he just needs to chill the fuck out, and that helping his life, like him and Nog being like, my dad ruined his whole life chasing this cultural ideal of. I said this on our old podcast one time. It's just like, I saw this kid on a show, and the kid was like, they asked the kid, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The kid goes, "I want to be Shaq." This kid was like 16 already and was 5 foot nothing.
Yeah.
And 100 and nothing. And his role model was Shaq. And I was like, you fucking pick the person you can't be like. The person of 9 billion of us that you can't be, you pick that as your. So that's like Einstein talking about if a fish, looked into a tree, he'd be like, damn, I suck. I can't do brachiation like the monkeys. I just swim in this water like a piece of shit. God, I suck, but if the monkey fell in the water, he'd be like, dude, this is awful. I am. So respecting yourself and your skills and your ethos, your personal ethos, more than cultural norms is a big part of all the nuance of even the villains.
Ed, you're fixing me?
And that is one of the goals with the show, is to make people think and to feel better about themselves or feel worse. Like, I'm cool with you guys feeling worse about yourselves too. And fixing that
hell
worse. Yeah.
In that respect, I'm going to ask 2 controversial questions because now we're in the middle and we know each other. Okay. Do you think New Trek is bad and why? And follow-up question, is Star Trek a left-wing show or a right-wing show? Because I in my discourse, am I looking at the shitty discourse of New Trek, I am finding so many people who are basically literally right-wing that love this show. And I'm finding left-winging, super like everybody acceptance, flower child type of hippie types and intellectuals who are just like, how the fuck could some right-wing person like this show? And I'm like, it's about the Space Navy. Okay. All of the ways we could articulate this exploration concept, they picked a nautical theme with a strict hierarchy of power and all this jazz. Like, I think you can understand why right wingers could like this show.
Totally.
Here, you go first.
Yeah. One, we love New Trek.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hashtag all Trek is Trek.
Yeah.
Come at me in the comments. I dare you.
Hashtag not all Trek. I think that New Trek could very well be pushed as like a right wing, like for sure. More than
not in its
Trek.
Individual politics,
but like
you're right
in
terms of like, because such a focus of New Trek has been,
it's the glorification of like military power a lot of the time.
I wouldn't even argue that it's glorifying, but they're making it more actiony, right? Like so by like if you watch like the Inner Light episode of TNG, like not a phaser was fired, but
there hasn't been an episode.
But if you watch Discovery, something's exploding, blah blah blah, like. I have a hard time imagining anyone right wing is watching Discovery and not noticing like the trans allegories of the Trill or like anything like that. But maybe there's enough of the other stuff that they go, but the cool explosion, or like, space, they were in command, that was mutiny, blah blah blah. Like maybe there's enough other stuff in there, but I can't imagine anyone is watching that and not notice. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't not notice.
Yeah.
Well, it's also crazy. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say. Plus, they're constantly poning liberal cucks, but
that's funny.
Sorry, you go, Ron.
The whole concept of Star Trek is that there's no capitalism anymore. You can't like. I don't know that if you're a conservative and you're not into capitalism, I'm fucking confused because that seems to be the most important thing to them. So I don't know.
Well, it seemed like it used to be, but then the evangelicals took over. But go ahead.
Here's the thing about Discovery specifically is that the first season of Discovery is about the war with the Klingons and being stuck in the mirror universe. So even though ultimately, if you watch the whole season, it comes around to they save the day by being Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when that show was coming out, episode to episode, Trek fans were like, what the hell is this? It's all action. They're not even Starfleet. She betrays an order. She starts a war. We're glorifying a war criminal as the main character of the show. And it took until the end. And then everyone was like, oh, but they saved the day by not like fighting, by... they do this other thing.
Oh, this is an arc. This is how we got to Starfleet. Yeah.
It took the whole season for that. And then, even season 2, because Section 31 is there. It's a shadowy rogue organization. They have this very authoritarian thing they want to accomplish. And then ultimately, what's the message at the end? It's like, how come the Enterprise wasn't around during the Klingon War? And the Admiral says, because if the rest of us got wiped out, we wanted you guys to survive. You're the best of us, right? And then like all of that stuff always comes back late in the season in Discovery. So there's a part of me that's like, episode to episode, I still think it's kind of inconceivable that someone right wing watches Star Trek and doesn't get it. But
I can see components of it though, right? Like,
but as a arc, I do kind of get that if you were I kind of get it, because the real like moral thing isn't being like, the bell isn't being necessarily rung super loud every episode, which as was the case with episodic Trek. Each episode of old Trek was like, and we learned this, even if the message was muddy, which it certainly was in Voyager and DS9, a lot of sort of like muddy ending episodes. But there was always like and think about that. And Discovery doesn't necessarily do that because it's more serialized. So I could see you getting further into a series before realizing that it's like, oh, wait a minute.
Well, and especially DS9 has components of it that are a little bit right. But
well, yeah, I mean, Sisko arguably commits war crimes going after the Maquis. He like irradiates their planet. Janeway denies Tuvix the right to live in favor of, as she puts it, speaking for Tuvok and Neelix as individuals who no longer have a voice. But like that Tuvix episode is like crazy controversial.
Yeah.
Hey, Tuvix was a collection of cells. He needs to get the fuck out of here.
Whoa! I came down. I'm pro Tuvix. Let him live. Let him live.
Tuvix, one track.
That's the weirdest porn video I've ever seen.
I'm so disturbed.
But yeah, the best Star Trek episodes do bring up things that aren't all wrapped up at the end. There will be things that are unresolved, but the gist will be it takes somebody sticking to your Star Trek morals for our ship to have survived this. At the end of the adventure, we may not have changed that whole society or rebuilt everything or made it in our image or anything, but we survived this adventure by sticking to our morals.
Yes. I have a theory about what right wing people might enjoy in Trek. Let's strip away the stuff we are pretty sure they won't enjoy. What's the thing that humanity really brings to the table? Which is like your gut.
Oh, yeah.
How many episodes are like an ensign goes like, I'm afraid I can't do that, Captain, and does the deflector and then saves the day, and the captain goes, good work, ensign. And you go like, all right.
If you would have fucked that up, though, you've been out of here.
The Vulcans are like, you people don't know what you're doing. And they're like, we don't, huh? And they're like, we're going to kidnap the Klingon ambassador.
Like a fox, we don't.
We're stupid like a fox.
Yeah.
So much of Star Trek, I mean, it is an American show. And so it does have, despite all of its, progressive thinking and its like left-wing politics, it does have that foundation of like American exceptionalism. Like we'll succeed because we're just like, it just happens to us.
and ingenuity.
Yeah.
Like, the problems are always solved with being smart and coming up with like a not looked at easily solution, and that's
being reckless, where it's like you can't run the warp plasma through the EPS conduit. It's like do it. And they do it, and they save the day. And it didn't blow up the ship. Well, our book said it would. We really shouldn't have tried it.
Well, yeah, there's something to this whole like the pussies say you can't, so we say we can.
That's what it is. That's
there's
exactly
a little
what
bit of something. Yeah,
100%. But I mean, overall, like I love Discovery very specifically because I think that it has a thing that Supernatural does, which is just like the, oh yeah, well how about this? Like it's the jumping the shark every moment, and you're just like, well, like you can't get past that, and they go, oh yeah,
totally,
hold my beer, we're gonna jump forward like in time. Like it's that shit that I love and that they pull off, and then they do it in some really complicated like science backed way that I. Like the mycelial network thing, like crazy concepts that like end up being like ingenious and then connects to like lore that it was already there. Like
last season's like quote unquote big bad was a scared psychic child telepathically connected to a planet of dilithium.
Yes,
that ignited or like made inert all the dilithium in the galaxy.
Like. That's
crazy.
Fucking insane.
That's like so high concept.
Yeah, like that's the stuff that I think I really love about Discovery and the like fan service stuff. They've definitely gotten a little like, I mean, I love it, but they've definitely got a little bit like wanky to fans in the last couple of shows. Like Picard is all fan service.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but on Lower Decks you cannot watch unless you've seen
also, I mean, you haven't even finished.
I know
you didn't finish Picard, but like that last episode of Picard, I was like weeping openly at home.
I mean, it doesn't take much, but yeah,
it's such like a coda. It's such a coda to the Data Picard relationship. And I was like full weeping. My wife was like, "What's happening?" And I was like, "I'm watching Star Trek."
That's awesome.
But yeah,
so we've been talking about a lot of the positive of Star Trek, and there is a ton. But just like in every property, there's got to be some stuff that you don't like. So let's hear it. What's some episodes? What's some movies? What is something that you did, that some writer did, where you were like, no, this is not Star Trek?
There is some weird, like, female, like, stuff within TNG that it's a little bit like taking power away from women that I don't love, like, or like weird creepy stuff that they play off as like eccentric characters that I don't love within
put
TNG.
on this jumpsuit.
But like, yeah, I like, there's like the whole Geordi thing really bugged me. I think like like him creating like a copy of a woman that he is infatuated with, and then like kind of like having control over her because she's a hologram. Like, yeah, I don't love that thing, and I think there's an opportunity there that they don't explore, because it's like he basically like recreates a woman that he's in love with, and then when she a real woman who then shows up and is like, what the fuck, and instead they make her look bad.
Yeah, Geordi is like, you're making me feel bad right now, and he wins the argument.
Yeah. It's that shit. I don't, and that's very like neck beard fucking incel shit that I can't stand.
Yeah,
where it's just like, yeah, but I deserve it because I worked hard, and it's just like, no, like that shit really bugs me. And they do the same thing with Barclay, because it's always the fucking holodeck.
Well, because he had the holo addiction.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Which again, great opportunity to like explore something really interesting, and they sort of just go like, fucking nerd, get out of here, like.
Yeah. Yeah, because they do the holo addiction with him. Again, it's the incel-y thing. It's not Riker going and fucking in that jazz club nonstop, and he's not reporting for his duty shift.
Yes.
Like,
I think part of it is also like, I mean, kudos for them to even like be addressing some of this stuff at all in the fucking 80s and early 90s. Like we're watching Supernatural, and that starts in fucking 2006, and there is like problematic shit.
Definitely.
Like the fact that the show is like even like was a delicate as it was with that is still pretty interesting, like considering its time frame. But it's still like, it definitely is like it's irksome. Like it's in a society where it's like we're imagining with the best possible like sort of end results of things, to then still be like not addressing that shit. Like it's clearly a bunch of fucking like male writers like in Hollywood, and it sucks. Like
no, I mean, I just think it's funny how often like the so-called intersectionality of issues makes for some strange bedfellows in episodes, because like there's a sort of a woman empowerment episode, the one with I think it's in season 2. It's got Tasha Yar in it, and she goes to like basically African planet, the planet that's basically like what Wakanda, for if you had $50 to make Wakanda, that's what the backdrop is. It's just a bunch of sheer scarves across.
It's Wakanda.
Like,
Wakanda. You know what? I'm gonna allow it. Normally I don't allow puns, but that's close enough to wordplay that I'll allow it.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that Wakanda is excellent. That's another T-shirt. We could sell it on both of our websites. Wakanda.
Hell yeah.
But basically, so they're in Wakanda, and it's sort of the males in that society pick strong women to be with, because in that society the women control all the assets. So this strong man who looks to be the leader but really isn't, picks Tasha Yar to be his next woman, and so she has to fight like the reigning Black Queen lady or whatever, and all this jazz happens. But it's trying to be almost female empowerment. Like, this society is primitive. They think I'm an object to be gathered. And at the end, it flips around. It's almost like the Orion Society. Like, the women actually run shit here, and women are very valued. And if Tasha Yar had won, she'd be queen of this super dope kingdom, and it would be pretty kind of cool. But it has all these sort of race tropes in there, you know, like so it's you know what I mean? It's like the intersectionality bumps up. It's like you have a feminist episode and have Black people looking shitty, you have Black people looking awesome. But I argue that the Darmok and Jalad aliens are Black. They have their funky, fresh way of speaking, and they got such dope space slang that you got to learn. You had to listen to all the Wu-Tang records to get their space slang to understand how to do diplomacy.
I talk about
RZA and Jizza in the.
Yep.
I mean, I could talk about that episode. The Darmok and Jalad thing is like a thing that I bring up constantly because it's such an interesting concept and actually reflects modern day society.
It's memes.
Well, that's exactly it, right? Yeah,
yes.
It's memes. And it's a thing that I talk about a lot because like my business partner and I talk about, we have a lot of employees who English is a second language. And we're always talking about like how we can make communication easier. And a thing that I am always bringing up is like not using like abbreviations, not using like letters to represent like words and things like that. Like making like language easier, and memes is the best way to do that. Because my partner was just like, should we be letting everybody like constantly just be sending memes all the time? And I'm like, it's a form of communication. Like it's a way for these people who like don't necessarily have the full understanding of a language to be able to then like communicate in the same sort of like plane, because we all have the same references. And I think like it's exactly what that is. And I fucking love that episode. It's one of my favorite.
Well, yeah,
yeah. So when you have a bad financial quarter, do you be like shaka when the walls fell?
Oh, the amount that I do that, like, so here's the thing. So Reid and I work together at this company, and like the amount of shit that like that stuff comes up, and we're just like constantly saying it to each other, and nobody knows what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah, there's another thing in Trek. And and one of the things is that in the effort to draw attention or really hammer home maybe a cultural difference or something,
you make it very black and white.
Or you play into tokenism, and the character that is the most true of is fucking Chakotay.
I would literally. So I was watching yesterday. I was watching Voyager, and somebody asked him if it was something was like an Indian practice, and I was like, oh,
okay,
well, God.
So first of all, they use the word Indian a lot, which is not great.
Yeah.
But even more than that, every time Chakotay is the first officer, he has the captain's ear. Every single time he has to talk Janeway out of something, or he has to make a stand, or he has to help someone through something, he goes, "It reminds me of a story my grandfather told me. The Raven through the night sky." And it's like every fucking time. And it's like, in a way, it's like, I know why they did it. They were like, Chakotay is like a First Nations officer on a starship, and we don't want to ignore that. But then they go the other way, where it's like, and it could just be because of a writer's room too. It's like, well, I haven't written Chakotay yet. I want to write like the Vision Quest.
Well, yeah,
and they always come back to these same things. Like they find interesting ways to tie them together. About like Chakotay's Vision Quest uses tech, and he does communicate with like higher dimensional beings in a couple of episodes. Like his culture is the channel to that, which is neat. But it's when it's always just like, I don't know, Chakotay, do we cut 3 weeks off the trip but risk war, or do we go around here? And he goes, when the river forks, there's and you're like, it feels so like tokeny.
They get like, really close to that in a few different characters. Like even Whoopi gets close to like the wise fucking mammy shit.
Worf
that I
is
like
also
hate,
like that, but you don't notice because he's Klingon.
Yeah,
you know, like every time you ask Worf for his advice, he goes, Kahless once, and you go like, oh, Jesus, Worf, forget it. Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny though. It's so performative. He's like those, and I can make this joke, but he's like those hardcore militant dudes with like their white girlfriend. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm so hardcore, militant, Kahless. Oh yeah, I'm part of Starfleet, and I sit in a cubicle all day, and I push the buttons.
I love prune juice.
He's just, oh god, yeah. I am a prune juice is a warrior's drink, bruh. And it's just like I'm so militant.
God, that episode with his mom though, when they find out that he likes prune juice, that tugged at the heartstrings.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
I mean, drink it.
His parents are adorable. I don't care. I don't care what kind of stereotypes they are. They're lovely, and I love his brother. His brother he's got an Italian brother from two Jewish parents that are Russian. Just go with it, roll with it. I love it.
His dad Tevye.
You got to take the gok and spin it around the fork.
Also, Tony Todd is his Klingon brother.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Kern.
Yes.
Hell yeah. So good.
Oh, dude, I love all that. Before we get into that minutia, this is what I want to do as we round out here.
Sure.
What is you guys' favorite Star Trek iteration and favorite captain? Because they might not go together.
Right.
Go ahead,
here,
Richard.
Right here, baby.
Oh yeah,
Picard. It's TNG and Picard for me. I mean, it's interesting because I mean that was definitely the Trek that I got pulled into. TOS was sort of never part of my sort of upbringing, and I only really like, my wife likes TOS more than I do, and so we'll watch that together. But it's sort of laughable. It's actually funny because we just saw Shatner 2 days ago at the Vancouver Fan Expo, which was very funny, and he mostly just complained about space, which is hilarious. But it's. I think for me, I keep going back to TNG, which is like not like me, because I usually like the newer iterations of shit. Like I like the like remakes of stuff, and I like the, like newer TV, and that's typically the way I go. And so, but every time I'm like, it just doesn't get better. And like basically TNG is like on a constant loop in this house. Like my wife is always watching it. Like we're always just going through it, and then we get to the end, and then we end up going back. She's actually trying Voyager for the first time, which has been interesting. But I think like this. Something about the way that like TNG was made, like it's like watching DS9 and Voyager after that. I'm like, these are good, and partly I think it's maybe trying to use two new technology that they're maybe not fully grasping, but it slightly looks cheaper than TNG. The care that's done with TNG for me, it feels like just a slightly more elevated approach to it. And then for me, the storytelling is unmatched. It's like. It's like when they got back to Doctor Who, when they brought Doctor Who back, and it was like those first like 3 Doctors, when they brought them back, like it's some of the best Doctor Who, and because they like are finally at a point where they can sort of accomplish the storytelling that they initially wanted to do, but not so much technology that they're bringing in really, really bad CGI. But they're also telling the stories that's like when really good storytellers finally take on a property, and it's like, oh, now we can really explore like taking this concept and doing the most with it. And it's like at a certain point, it's like, well, we're starting to run out of like ideas. But like when you get those first fucking 5 seasons of Trek, like of TNG, it's just like some of the best storytelling in sci-fi, because it's like the right perfect time. You get some of the best storytellers. Like, yeah, I think I can never get past that. And then Picard as a captain is incredible because one, you're getting a ship that's not a military ship, so the intention behind it is not. It's a fucking diplomatic ship.
I mean, also though, for a diplomatic ship, they're like, "Hey, can you guys fight the Borg? Keep all the kids, get the kids to hide under their desk.
Yeah,
we've got an active Borg drill on the ship."
But it's a fucking cruise ship, and it's like it's largely a conference ship. Like it's
a Marriott in space.
Yeah, it's and for me, like. Picard is always good because he's not so sure of himself that he won't allow others. He grows in a way that is like he started strong and just gets deeper and stronger. And you actually get the like, if something happens to him, that is reflected in the rest of the show.
And he gets more vulnerable over time.
Yeah.
And it makes him better.
And he learns how to play the fucking flute. Like it's
most important.
Yeah, but also he can have like a fucking sexy romp and like go for an archaeological.
Picard lays pipe.
Oh yeah, I mean episode 2, he goes after like Beverly. Like,
if you think he doesn't just lay, he eats puss too. He does it all.
Oh,
100%. All those the orgasms are coming if you're hanging out with Picard.
He's hot as hell. Like
time to energize.
Engage. But when he's able, like, yeah, and when he dresses in casual wear, he wears fucking these like really loose, like low cut tops and stuff. Like,
I know it's not really an answer to the question, but I do love that the vision of like casual wear in Star Trek's future is like, what if we were all like just clean serfs in the Middle Ages?
Yeah.
Like it's like loose tunics and like billowy pants.
I fucking love it.
And shit like that. That's just like what they wear.
Yeah. But that's also why I think it's weird that the only thing I don't like about so-called new Trek as it goes with Discovery, those uniforms look so stuffy, and I'm like, this is the future. You shouldn't all look like admirals in stuffy uniforms. You're flailing about on the ground. You're running. You're karateing people. Your regular workaday uniform would be like an ill-ass T-shirt that fit when those places that'll custom you a T-shirt.
Yeah,
everybody should have custom T-shirts and custom little jogging pants.
No, dude, it'll be like
Kirk was wearing like a fucking rap shirt. Like Kirk had that like kimono shirt.
That's the thing, right?
Kirk had a kimono, but Picard had a romper straight up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Here's the thing about Picard. Like Kirk, I feel like some of the crew rolled their eyes at him, right? Like,
yeah,
/ actors.
Yeah. I think that like Janeway always had to fight for every fucking decision she makes until maybe the later seasons. But like,
there's a lot of back talk, but part of her crew is Maquis. So.
Sure, totally. But it always feels like she always has to earn the like approval and like the decisions she makes.
Yes.
I think like Cisco is great, but he's got such a fucking chip on his shoulder that he's fighting against people who aren't even fighting against him.
Yeah.
Like Picard is just like so effortless in his ability to like command. It's like no one ever like questions it. And if anybody does, the rest of the crew is just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like
he has a real like gravitas.
Yeah, exactly. Like he walks into a room and you're just like, everyone's like, all right, I mean, look, at the end of the day, he's in fucking charge. And I think like that's the reason why I always go back to Picard is just like he's open to every part of the conversation. He could shut down the conversation when he thinks he's heard enough, and everyone respects him.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Captain, I agree. It's Picard.
Yeah.
He's a scientist. He's a sensual man. He's a musician. He gets better with kids as the show goes on.
After he gets his own.
He loves Picard Day. And then...
You know what? One thing I would just want to interject about Picard, though, he's going to win this, but I feel as though Picard is like LeBron James. and this is how
I'm listening.
Every team that LeBron James goes to, if you know anything about basketball or even if you don't, when you go to that team, they used to run this offense. Now they run the LeBron offense.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Everything fits around LeBron to the point where he'll come to a team that had 50 wins last year, and they'll win like 2 games out of 10 when he's not playing because he makes their entire offense around him. And I just think we love TNG. TNG is such a good conduit for feeding Picard the ball, but not too much to where he ruins everything.
Yeah.
It's a perfect balance of him.
He's a team player, but he has to be in the team.
And the proof is in the pudding too. You can say what you will about it being a waste, but Captain LaForge, in the episode of Voyager, where old Harry Kim and Chakotay tried to send coordinates back in time to stop Voyager from crashing and everyone dying, LaForge goes after them, and he's not like firing all the weapons at them and stuff. He just goes, I have to try and stop you. And Chakotay goes, I have to, like, I'm not going to go in. I have to make this happen. He goes, I totally get it. I would do the same thing if it were my crew. So good luck to you. And Chakotay says, good luck. And they go, like, the spirit of like, I'm going to do what I have to do, but I know you're doing what's right in your, like, that is a thing you learn from Picard. Riker goes and takes the Titan, and then he, like later, he shows up in Picard
or Measure
again.
of a Man, like Riker has to take the other side.
Or when Picard is taken by the Borg, Riker keeps things on, like, no, this is like, Picard is right, and this is how we should do it. Like, that whole crew, go on to have the kind of like the exploration and the willingness and all those things you want in Picard, the bravery, all those things. Future Crusher in the finale episode of TNG goes like way out on a limb for someone who should just be considered senile to help Picard out there. Like everyone, Worf really comes into his own. He leaves the Enterprise and he comes into his own on DS9. He briefly becomes the fucking Chancellor of the High Council, but he ends up being ambassador to Kronos. Like he's like the most important Klingon dignitary in the Federation.
Who didn't even grow up within the Klingon Empire.
And you look at him in those first few episodes, he's always baring his fucking teeth and shit like that. Who do you think he learned diplomacy from?
Yeah.
Fucking Picard.
It's true.
They have that moment in First Contact where like Picard is like too Borg crazy, right?
Yeah.
And he's saying like, you're a coward. And Worf has that like, if you were any other man, I'd kill you where you stand kind of thing. And then later they have this like, Picard's like, I've never respected any warrior more than you. Like they have such a fucking relationship. That's all Picard. Like, so definitely for Captain, he's my fave.
Sure.
This is maybe.
Are you going to go to the Dominion Wars?
No, not because of that, but I'm going to say DS9.
Really?
Because there's something I like about Star Trek. Star Trek very literally confronting science and religion and the relationship between them.
Sure.
They never go full, the prophets are gods, or full, they're just aliens in a wormhole.
Sure,
it's always in the middle. It's a relationship. And also the idea of like, it's easy to be pure of heart and noble and shit on Earth.
Yeah.
It's hard out here. Like, how do you stick to your principles when it could undo you? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to have principles on Earth, but out here on Bajor, if we just go like, well, we can't arrest them because they didn't do anything first. And it's like, those people could go away and ruin everything. And so it's like the stakes of the principles of Starfleet are so much higher on DS9. And I like that. And you get episodes that end with like, we did the thing and it should feel like the right thing. And somehow it doesn't. Yeah. Or they do like, we did the wrong thing, but somehow it feels like the right thing. Mm-hmm. DS9 has so many episodes that end that way. And I never would want it to go all the way to like answering it definitively and being like, do you know what? Out here, the rules are out the window. We're going to do shit this way. But like, I like that they're exploring that it's not all.
They're in no man's land, yeah.
And it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. The thing we were saying about the different aliens, not all Ferengi are this, not all this are what. It's that the Federation's way of working doesn't always meet with the exact same results or the results you want or the whatever. So there's something I find interesting about the DS9 era.
Sure, yeah.
It's like real democracy. Because that's like what real democracy is supposed to be is, honestly, no one's really all that happy, but everybody gets a little bit of something.
Successful democracy is when everyone's unhappy.
Yeah.
Well, it's successful. They did that with the successful deals, but I don't know if it really works with democracy. I think in democracy, if everybody's dissatisfied, you get a rebellion, and then we're right back to stage one where we're all messed up. But okay, I'm not going to be hot take Sally right now because I think I'm going to do an episode with
Enterprise is the best show.
Oh, dude, that's the hot that is a Nova take.
I'll throw it out there though. Enterprise best theme.
No,
come at me. Find me in the comments. No. I dare you.
Fuck you.
Okay. Enterprise having the best theme is utter madness and nonsense. But I will say this: when I started watching it, and I would skip the theme song because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And then I stopped skipping the theme song. And then it kind of Stockholm syndrome me. There were 4 lights. There were you know, and it really got to me that it was kind of good. And then they fucking wrecked it by throwing like that beat on it and making it speed up and shit. I was like, no, this is a corny fucking, I don't want to close my eyes type of jam. Okay. Let it be that. You can't hip it up with this beat.
I agree there. I agree. The remix, brutal. But like that theme and like watching, like it starts from like Michelangelo drawings to like the stuff from First Contact. Okay. I'm like, we're doing it.
Okay, here's the thing. I will say,
the Wright brothers.
I remember when the show premiered and being very excited about it. And I remember when the intro started, I was like, this is a whole new Trek. This is Trek for me, baby. And then it was like, oh, I don't like this.
It's a tougher pill to swallow.
Yeah,
admittedly.
but yeah, fair.
Well, okay, so basically, not the hottest take in the world, which would be Enterprise is the best because he is the first captain technically, and he's the one who establishes the blah blah. You know, there are people who probably feel that, and I don't want to disrespect them in any way. But it is interesting that you know. Berman, that's true blue Berman Trek right there.
Definitely.
And Rick Berman definitely comes in from just like sort of regular television, not necessarily sci-fi television. And he just wants like sexy butts, the sexy little butts, definitely small, sort of flattish butts, prominently displayed, and big fat boobs, and people rubbing radioactive ointment on each other.
Oh, I forgot about that on
showers
Enterprise.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shit like that. So like Enterprise hits this own thing. I'm gonna do a separate episode about how Voyager is the best with my buddy Brian Simpson, who's like a big time comedian now, and he really agrees with me. But I'll just say this: this is why I think that for my money, Voyager is not the best show, and it has one of the worst casts of all of that jazz. So it's blows my mind every time that I find it so enjoyable to watch, because you guys are absolutely right. It looks cheaper. The cast is worse, and the captain has all this goddamn pushback like a woman would, even in the 24th century. Yeah. But the sum of it, the best episodes of Voyager to me are emblematic of the best of Trek. And I think that's it's weird that happens in comics, like a little run of Kraven the Hunter versus Spider-Man that ran weekly, and Web of Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man in another book. That's the best Kraven the Hunter story ever. And it happens in this inferior so-called format because people didn't care about it. So they were able to, and my exemplary episode of Voyager that is Star Trek is, number one, Voyager are actually alone. They have families on the ship because it's an inconvenience to have families, not because there's convenient places for them to go and Jeffrey Stew's from the hide in when the Borg come, whatever. Yeah. It's so inconvenient that there's families on here. It's so inconvenient that our crew is so cobbled together. That's number one. Number two, we're actually on a Star Trek because we can't call Admiral whoever the fuck to come save us anytime we want to. We can't call back up. There's never a scene where a bunch of ships help them do anything. There is one, but you know what I'm saying. And then it's all of them. And then the last things last, there's episodes like The Void, where basically they go into this fucked up void where there's no stars and everybody's cannibalizing each other and eating each other. And there's no way that these ships who are trapped in the void will ever make it out ever. But Star Trek morals come into play. And some people, the meme, meaning viral idea, of being a good guy and helping motherfuckers out in space because we're all on a Star Trek and we need to help each other and share resources to get enough power to escape this void. And she does it. She changes a cannibalistic, shitty society into a unified union of dudes, well, at least 7 or 8 of them, get together to get the fuck out of there to pool their resources. It's just like, that's Star Trek in a nutshell. And it's in this inferior show with this captain that isn't Picard. And it's just like, to me, one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever.
But does anybody fuck a ghost?
Good point.
I don't think so.
Their grandma's fuck ghost. Specifically, my grandma loved this fuck ghost.
Is there 2 separate episodes where someone fucks a ghost? I don't think so.
That's a good point.
Are there multiple? There are multiple episodes where people go to an Irish town and fuck all the lasses and turn them into cows. And shit. There's a bunch of those episodes of Voyager.
Janeway keeps messing with the Hollow Matrix to make her man more fuckable.
But I will say, for Voyager,
circumference increased by 2%.
I will give you 3 words of why Voyager is great, though. Yeah. And 2 of them are numbers, baby.
Yeah,
that's 7 of 9.
Oh yeah,
you're a real Rick Berman of yourself.
You goddamn right.
Dude, I maintain though, if they had have discovered 7 of 9 versus Kess earlier in the series, I think that series would stand up like the rest of them. But I think they wasted 3 years
100%.
trying to make Kess happen, trying to make Fetch happen. And it was just like they refused to get real about Kess being this young person, who ages like more like a dog, basically, or more, and they refused to actually engage with that or talk about how wrong it would be for Neelix to basically be with a 2-year-old. They refused to engage with that on any level. They just make Neelix and her have this psychosexual, weird, stupid relationship. And as soon as she's gone, Neelix becomes a good character. As soon as Kess is out of there, the shit just takes off.
I'm about to say something that if you just clipped it and put it out, I would get canceled.
Hold on, let me pause this. Hold on.
I've always been weirded out by the Neelix and Kess relationship thing because Ocampa only lived 9 years. So she's 1 when she comes on the ship, but she's an adult. And she and Neelix are in a romantic relationship. And that's weird. But she is sentient and an adult of her species. Is that not as weird as, let's say in the Kelvin timeline, Spock and Uhura?
Yeah, Spock, I mean he is. You know what I mean? A Twilight vampire. I think you're right.
Isn't that also well, I'll live 200 years and you're what, 18?
Nice.
I don't know. Is it? I know it's weird, but if you did it the other way around, where it was someone of a 30-year-old human with a 150-year-old Vulcan, would we feel as weird about it?
Sure, yeah.
Like if you were like a Tuvok and someone shipper on
you know
Voyager.
what it is? It's the fact that Kes sucks is why we're bringing up all these points. If Kes didn't suck, we would just paper over it like we do with all the rest of fiction that has problematic elements.
Yeah, those are real. Those are real Meg Griffin episodes.
Yeah, it's weird. I forgot how much. I forgot how much she sucked until I started watching Voyager again, and I'm like, get out of here.
No, I'm just saying Voyager stuff suffers. Just last Voyager talk. It just suffers from a key miscalculation in cast design.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how fragile and beautiful a Fabergé egg TNG actually is. Because it remains the best cast, even though they had their own minor missteps with Tasha Yar basically being super not interesting until she got killed.
And bringing in that fucking doctor.
Dr. Pulaski.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah. Pulaski and Deanna Troi, honestly, being used as like a receptacle for every fucked up male fantasy or fucked up psychosexual thing they wanted to talk about. She got fridged, she got inseminated, she got all types of terrible shit because they couldn't figure out.
It was a ghost, it's fine.
Even in the fucking movies though. In Star Trek Nemesis, she gets like mentally violated by the Riemann played by Ron Perlman.
But like, and why she has to have that she couldn't just wear a science officer outfit? Like,
well, that was Captain Jellicoe's whole issue. He's like, we have a dress code.
Yeah.
Which is the best part about Jellicoe. Jellicoe was like, look, man, I like to look at ass just as much as anybody, but you need to put some goddamn clothes on. If you
right? Like,
like that's very.
It was weird when he said that, but I get it.
And I love how at the end they do this kind of, I don't want to say forced because shitty people say like forced diversity and shit like that. I don't want to say forced in that shitty way, but I am saying, boy, they really jammed like a captain, like an executive captain thing up her butt, later. Like she really got interested in I really want to be in command. I'm like, what? Why would you want to do that?
Commander.
Which is
she
so
has
weird.
The rank of commander. And when she shows up on Voyager in that episode with Barclay, she's got the commander pips and she's wearing the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Crusher's also a commander though, right?
It was just almost like it's almost like they were taking like a counselor, like a lady counselor, and dragging her into like the CEO's office and sitting her down in the chair and being like, you have to want this. The whole point of the future is you can want what you want. You don't have to be some culturally specific whatever. That's the whole point of being in the future. So I just thought that part was a little bit of a misstep. But one of the only missteps in TNG ever. Sure. TNG is flawless. Everybody loves it. It's awesome.
So guys, I'm going to make an argument. So look, Patrick Stewart, if we're just talking about like my favorite to watch, it's Picard.
Yeah. Sexual magnetism. I get it.
Yeah. All that. But I'm going to make an argument for Kirk.
Okay.
And here's my argument. I was thinking about this, and this is just like a creating Trek fandom situation. The original series was 3 seasons.
Yeah.
1966 through 1969.
It's crazy there was only 3 seasons. I always forget that.
The next movie didn't come out until 1979.
Yeah.
And then you had the subsequent movies after that. And then TNG comes out in 1987. So basically, I'm going to make the standing on the shoulders of greatness argument. And say that while, yes, Shatner is a pile of garbage, I think that him as a captain was something that basically made people enjoy Star Trek to a point where it was like, in that time period, he was like a manly man who also like did do diplomatic things.
Yeah.
He did like solve problems, and sure, he could get in a fisticuff. And I think that time period leads to a better time period. So while I do think Picard is better, I think that there's an argument that James T. Kirk is hugely important into getting to better Star Trek. And that's going to be my argument for him being my favorite.
in support of your argument, what Star Trek has proven is that you need a Kirk on your crew.
That's what Riker
in
was.
TNG.
Yeah.
It's Riker. On Voyager, it's Paris.
Yeah.
You need on Enterprise, it's Trip Tucker. You need a Kirk on your crew because there's
Burnham,
there's that element of the rough and tumble, think on your feet, we'll sort it out when we get there. That kind of almost swashbuckler kind of thing that makes it kind of captivating to watch.
It's a Han Solo, yeah.
I mean, and that's baked in, and then the fact that he could swashbuckle or fisticuffs or make a mortar to fight the Gorn or whatever he's doing, and then also turn around and go have some sort of philosophical thing about a man needs pain, a human needs pain. He does both things, right? So I think there's lots of strong arguments for Kirk.
Get you a captain who can do both.
Yeah,
and then obviously, Enterprise is my favorite world that I'm going to live in.
It's been a long road.
No, TNG's still my favorite. I want a fucking holodeck. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I mean that would be a problem, though.
I mean that Lower Decks does such a great job when they're someone's job is to clean out the
their job is to empty the holodeck waste.
Yeah.
What kind of waste? Sweat, other bodily fluids. Moving on. That's
funny.
But okay, so as we end here, I would like to ask sort of a creative question. If there was something that you could do to so-called new Trek, or if you were going to create a little bit of your own Trek in your own world or whatever, I'll start just really quickly to give you guys time to vamp and think. I just hope that Brave New World is what it's advertised, as in episodic Star Trek episodes, because I honestly believe that even as Discovery is, as presently constructed with the world and everything, they could do single issue stories, as a comic book fan would say. They could do single episode stories, then they choose not to. I'm not saying that arcs aren't cool, season arcs aren't cool. They started in, I guess, late TNG going into DS9 and so on and so forth. But I just think there's got to be room for we went out there, we got lost, we figured some shit out, and we were by ourselves, and we got out of it with our morals. Yeah. There have to be some of those adventures. So I hope that that's what people are wanting to have more, rather than more white captains, if you dig what I'm saying. I hope that that's what people are yearning for, more than, I wish there weren't so many trans people and weirdos and this and that and the other, and kung fu black ladies with bad wigs, and this is bad. I don't like a white captain, good hair, pithy comments, punches to the jaw. That's what I want. I hope it's less of that bullshit. Right. And more of, I really do miss these 1 hour morality plays.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly where I stand, I think, for sure. There's two things that I really like in movies and TV. One is bureaucracy and really complicated things, especially sci-fi. And then I think the other thing is origin stories and finding out that you're the one. I love that shit.
Right.
I think that if I wasn't going to get that story, I'd want the other one, which is I want the First Contact show. I want Enterprise, but done well, but slightly even before that. I want the what happens when we first find out that there's all of these other fucking planets out there, and that we get space travel, and we start making these relationships with other species, and that. I mean, you're describing Enterprise. I know, but Enterprise starts a little bit farther into it than that. You do start getting new into, but they still have other species involved and stuff even from the beginning. And
True,
stuff. But I think and they're all a little flashy and shiny still. I think. Right. I would love another kick at the can at that. I think that there's a better opportunity for that. And
not to super interrupt, but I think that there is a buddy cop show between the first liaison to Vulcan, and the first liaison to Vulcan, and then just kind of oh man, you ain't got no goddamn emotions,
except the police chief is Vulcan, so he doesn't fly off the handle.
It's I am very disappointed in your antics. The mayor is up my ass.
Yeah. That's incredible. But I would love
literally,
to see
the mayor is a specific species that lives in the ass of Vulcans.
I want to see the turning point for society when they go like
yes.
Oh, money, let's get rid of that. Let's start like embracing a socialist society. Like let's connect and unite because we need to fucking be better for space. Like
I riff on this?
Please. Go for it.
I'm going to riff on this. Here's my pitch for a show. Takes place, I guess, roughly Picard era, but maybe a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of around that, like very late 24th century.
Sure.
Upon Voyager's return from the Delta Quadrant, I kind of want to see a show. This could get untenable, but it's either a really like Alpha Beta Quadrant diverse cast of like a rep from a bunch of species, or it's that sort of joint fleet from like a Federation ship, a Romulan ship, a Klingon ship, whatever, head to the Delta Quadrant because they're like, we know it's there and they know about us. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but now it's our job to like diplomatically and economically and whatever go to the Delta Quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
And I want like a reverse Voyager where it's like, here's all of us. This is like that, working together to go forward. And you could do it because, Romulus has already been destroyed by this point. They're starting to, the Romulan and Vulcan reintegration is starting to happen. The Klingons have been our allies for a long time. Like even a Cardassian, you start just bringing them in and it's like you send them into the Delta Quadrant. And then it's kind of like so
a bit of a Noah's Ark kind of thing.
But you're kind of getting your first contacty thing. I know Voyager has made lots of contact, but it's also like what happens after first contact. Lower Decks jokes about how second contact is more difficult because you have to sign all the papers, you have to organize all the stuff. Like that's partly the bureaucracy. That's partly the harder work of like, it's one thing to beam into a solar system and be like, we need this. And they go, we don't want that. You go, pew, pew, pew. See ya. And you can like leave and go all the way back to Earth. It's harder to be like, we're coming back. We want to engage with you. We're not here to colonize, but like, how do we fix what Voyager messed up or build on what Voyager built? And like, how do we explore this region of space?
I mean, it's interesting because it's kind of like what Mass Effect, the video game, was trying to do, which is just like what like when Earth, like when Earth joins the Federation, like what happens, right? Like, and then the like sort of new series that they try to start up but totally fucked up, which is like what happens when the Federation then goes to a new galaxy and like how do they integrate there?
But like I just imagine like a fleet. You have a Vulcan ship, a Ferengi ship, a Cardassian freighter, like a kind of convoy. I don't want to use that word, but a group of ships going to.
Be careful
like
with
a
that
convoy
word.
For like freedom in a new
and they've all
galaxy.
got like flags.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Real quick, that thing though that you're pitching is exactly what I wanted Discovery to be when they discovered that this is a world with no fucking dilithium. Nobody can get around and go to all these different quadrants, but we have a ship that can appear anywhere in the universe like that. So you'd have to go make these first contacts with these people who are basically cavemen now. They used to be all the way up to par with everything when there was all this traffic, but now that there isn't, you have to go back and reestablish contact with these people who have fallen into disrepair. You need to do this, and due to your fact that you can jump everywhere, of course, the technology would fail while you were there to trap you there until you solve the problem. Yeah. And then your shit would be repaired and you could jump back out and go, woo, we went to the caveman system. Those motherfuckers, we got them throwing rocks now. So that's an improvement, or whatever. Yeah. I would love for Discovery to have morphed into that. And I actually wrote a Discovery spec. Dork. I wrote a Discovery spec that was basically just that. They went and had like a Moby Dick adventure with dudes who were like killing space whales way over there because they had to revert to mining space whales for whatever was their shit, like Queequeg and shit. They had to go back to these barbaric, shitty ways. Like, this is a protected species. Protected? Fuck you. Like, there's no protection out here, bro. I'm living how I live, and you're not going to come put all these morals on me, stupid. That was the whole crux of the episode, and they had to like show them their morals. The other people had to kind of meet the Enterprise people halfway, and then they got to go back. But like, I would love for Discovery to be more of that type of stuff, or rather, Discovery people to just more of that type of stuff, to where there's an overarching arc of them taking the lithium to all these different places and trying to get the Federation back together. But they have these one-off adventures where they run out of gas in hillbilly land of space and have to figure this shit out.
Have you watched Orville?
Oh yeah.
It kind of like fulfills a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's hard to get past because it's like fucking Seth MacFarlane. But like, I think like once you get past that, like I think that like it is just kind of a good Trek show. We watched the trailer for the new season, and it was wild. It looked better than Discovery did. Yeah, it was crazy. It's kind of
Orville is definitely Trek methadone.
Yeah, totally, 100%.
So, well, listening to you guys, because what I find interesting is like, what if we never had to worry about food? Like that's a thing that I think about, and then, I mean, it is. It's one of those things where like if nobody had to worry about buying food and having a place to live, like those things. And I like the idea of it starting out there, but you can't do that because that's not a Star Trek. That would be on Earth. But I'm curious what if you're part of the Enterprise and you are watching the drama of another planet unfold. Mm-hmm. And the argument is, do we get involved or not? I read these. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's a single episode of Voyager that you could expand out to this premise where they're trapped in the gravity well of a planet whose gravity well is so strong that it's affected relativity. So time on the planet passes like way more quickly. Like Voyager's in orbit for like 4 days. And meanwhile, they go from cavemen through the Middle Ages, through like industrialism, through to warp technology. By the end, the people on the planet who used to worship them as a sky god send their ships up and tractor them out of orbit.
Oh, wow.
So like if you took that and spread it out, like that's exactly what you're talking about, which is interesting in its own way. I don't know mechanically, like as scripts, how you manage like that dynamic of like, and here's what we're watching. But there's something in there that is Trek and is interesting, and because they touched on it. So yeah, how would you expand that? That'd be fun. Yeah.
You can have like a federation that comes and like randomly pops in every few years or like every like 10, 20 years, and you get to see each episode. It's like, oh, now they're in this age.
Yeah, maybe it's like anthology style or something. Yeah, who knows?
Oh yeah, well, the Star Trek banging the Expanse, you kind of can't go wrong with that, you know. So yeah, I mean, so you guys, thank you guys for being on here and exploring all these shits, because Ron is like that put upon wife that has to hear about all the basketball guys and how tall each one of them is as relative to their position and why it matters.
It's a very important thing.
Yeah, he has to hear all that shit. He has to hear about the infinite potential of forward. Yeah. Oh yeah, but Picard is a power forward.
Yeah. I only understand the basic concepts. You know.
Ball, basket.
So no, it's been great to talk to people who like this has been like that scene where Tony Stark and Bruce Banner get to talking on the ship in Avengers. It's like, hey, somebody speaks English around here. But no, Ron really tries to humor my Star Trek obsessions, and I really think that he brought you to me like King Kong brings a fruit to that lady he captured. Just like here is something that you would like.
I did actually think that you would enjoy this, Ed, and that is part because what happened was I was listening to Ghostfacers, and then in one of the episodes, you guys mentioned how much you love Star Trek and talk about it so often, and I thought to myself, well, Ed loves Star Trek, and the minutia that Ed likes Star Trek in is such that while listening to you guys, I was like, this is gonna be great. So
Kevin Durant is Geordi. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Worf is Will Chamberlain.
You're doing a lot of fucking.
Or maybe Riker is
the tall guy that takes Wesley Crusher away, the Traveler. He's Larry Bird.
He looks kind of like Larry Bird. He's got that kind of bird face. And those thick fingers for shooting basketballs. But realistically, guys, thank you guys so much. We want to let you plug your shit, and I would like to formally invite you back on to do even some Patreon content with us about some more Star Trek specific or whatever. Maybe I'll return the favor and let Ron and you guys prattle about Supernatural and try to and some type of thing. But I'd like to invite you because our Patreon is where we get loose and we go kind of into the details of stuff. And so that might be a really fun time. But I want to let you guys that's patreon.com/the greatest pod. So you can join that and hear all this extra shit. But you guys, what are your podcasts? What are your projects you have coming up? Give you a nice long runway to plug your shit, buddies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want to hear us prattle on about Supernatural, not only on this Patreon, but on our own podcast, we have a podcast called Ghostfacers, a Supernatural rewatch.
That's right. Ron has been on before as a guest. We're going through every single episode of Supernatural. We're halfway through season 4 right now of 15. We talk real world monster lore and behind the scenes stuff about the show. We got fun guests like Ron and others, and it's a good time. Fair warning, there's a lot of thirst over how hot the guys are because they're hot.
We forget that the women are hot, but the guys sure get a lot of attention.
Yeah, guys are crazy hot on that show.
And then also, if you're a fan of this podcast, you most likely will like our other podcast, which is all about DC Comics. It's called Dr. DC.
Yeah, the Dr. DC podcast. Every week we answer listener questions about a character or a topic or a type of power or something like that from DC Comics. We try to make it so it's like not daunting or anything. Like you don't have to know anything. It's mostly a jump off point for us to be
talking about cum,
silly and dumb, and yes, and that.
I do want to know how every character in DC comes. I want to know what their faces are.
Well, then you got to subscribe to the Patreon. Come on, we're not just giving that away for free.
No, hang on. The first one's free. To quote Mallrats, Superman blows a load like a shotgun right through her back.
Batman needs to be in a straitjacket in Crime Alley, getting hit with crowbars, and then he'll come.
Batman can only do a pearl necklace.
I was damn it, you got to it first. God damn it.
That is so good.
Damn it, I was like right there. I was like, as soon as he's finished, whatever he's gonna fucking say, I'm gonna say that. Dr. DC.
Wonderful.
The best ad we could have had. So, all right. Well, without further ado, thank you guys for coming on. Ron, drop that signature exit line and we will be out of here.
Well, the first exit line is rate and review our podcast, guys. It helps us. So go on your app, put 5 stars, and say nice things about us. On top of that, we just like to thank you for listening to another episode of The Greatest Pod.
Yeah, got a little hair metal there, buddy.
Yeah, I know.